Pastor, I have this question. So, Pastor, planting a church, right? It's not a quarterly or a one-year project. It is a long-term commitment.
That's right.
It's like buying a car or buying a house where you have to pay monthly installments, and there's no backing out. So, Pastor, I'm just wondering, when God led you, or when you felt led by God to plant, do you have any fears or concerns in regards to this commitment? Because it's long term, it's all the way. There's no I'm going to do it a few weeks and see.
Sure.
It's all the way. But Pastor, do you have any?
I'm sure there were, Stephen. It's just that, I'll probably pick up one or two. For me, because I did not speak to many people about church planting, it was just put on me, and I didn't do research, I didn't check with anyone, so maybe the fears were lesser. Sometimes it's when you start talking about it that people will tell you all the stories about why you shouldn't, or even if they don't say why you shouldn't, they'll tell you in a way that will lead you to be afraid. So I think sometimes also is probably wise not to talk too much about it. When God gives you something, I've been taught many years before, you don't have to check with the committee. You definitely have to have some level of accountability and all that. But in my situation, there was no one to be accountable to at that time. It was just God saying to me, I want you to plant a church. Did I want to plant a church? No. Because I was really enjoying myself being a youth evangelist at that time. I was going everywhere in Malaysia, being invited to speak and having amazing results by the grace of God. So when you are successful in a particular part of ministry or particular ministry, you want to continue to do more of that. But when the Lord says, no, I did not call you just to make decisions, because there are many souls that were coming through our rallies, and 3,000 young people gave their lives to Christ, in fact, in within 5 years span. But the Lord said to me, you might think that's successful, but I never asked you to make decisions. I asked you to make disciples.
Wow.
And so with that, I knew that, He wanted me to spend more time with the few. Not just the thousands coming to know the Lord, but the few that He wanted to disciple. And so I knew that He wanted me to plant a church. So back to the fears and all those thoughts, I really enjoyed what I was doing. And the fear was like, I couldn't do what I was doing. I had to be stuck in one place for a long time. I think I've told X-Church before about the fivefold ministry. The thumb is the apostle, because he touches everything. The index finger is the prophet because he points. The evangelist is the middle finger because it's the longest, he has the longest reach. And then the pastor is married to the church. Of course, the teacher is the smallest finger that, easy to get into the ear. But the pastor, married to the church, is not what I wanted to hear. Stuck in one place, committed to a few people. Because I already tasted success on the field and in the field, and on stages where there were hundreds, if not thousands, of young people listening and responding and filling up the altar calls. I've tasted that already, and I love that, and I wanted more of that. And the Lord says, I'll give it back to you. Don't worry, you'll come back one round. But you've got to be faithful, because it's disciples that I want. So that was a fear, being stuck, not having any more of what I was tasting, and having such a great time doing that. The fear of having to walk people through some really messy stuff, because as an evangelist, I had a lot of people coming to the altar and sometimes bawling their eyes out. But then I'll pray for them, minister to them for a few minutes, and then I'll walk to the next person, and then we're done. And sometimes they even think you're a hero, Wow, Pastor Kenneth, thank you so much. You got the word of the Lord, and you ministered to me, wonderful, all those words of compliments, and I feel very good as I leave the building. Then I can see from the corner of my eye, they go to their pastor, and their pastor hug them, and I'm like, okay, pastor, take over, because I'm the evangelist, I've done my job, And I know for a fact that the pastor has a harder job because the problem doesn't end at the altar usually. The answer starts, but it continues for weeks and months. And so that also caused me a lot of anxiety. Oh God, I'm going to have to walk people through months, if not years. And I know that because, through the years, I've heard people going like, Pastor, 5 years ago, you prayed for me and I was so blessed, but I still have a question. I'm like, 5 years ago, and you're still in that place. And I'm like, okay, pastors have the responsibility to be like a parent, and so that was one of my fears, the long-term commitment, the getting stuck in one place and getting stuck with a few people. And so you really have to have a pastor's heart. And a pastor's heart, you can either already have it because the Lord gave it to you before you even started at church, or you can develop it as you go. But whatever it is, the Lord will have to give it to you. You will have to love people. And I think I love people when I was evangelist, but you will have to love people long term. That's probably the difference. And you will have to stick with them and stay with them until you see their lives break through. And if their lives don't break through, you really feel the pain. Your heart breaks, and people might even leave the church after you have spent years investing into their life. So a pastor's heart is very different from an evangelist's heart, very different from an apostle's heart, very different from a prophet's heart. A pastor married to the church, to death do us part. What do we say in our vows? For richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. Oh God, I'm like, God, are you sure you want me to be a pastor? Because I didn't think I had a pastor's heart. So whatever I gained through the years is the Lord rubbing His heart. Because Jesus is the pastor of all pastors. And so He has to rub His heart on your heart. And so mine was more developed. Probably I'm still developing, but those were some of my fears. Other little stuff was probably like, where do we meet? How many people will come to this church? Finances to buy instruments. But all that came later. It didn't dawn on me when I first thought about obeying God to plant a church. Those thoughts were not there yet. When I took the step of faith, I'm like, okay, Lord, now what? Where? How? Who? How much? And I had to think about stuff like offering and collecting. I never used to collect offering, in my rallies, But now I have to think of collecting offering and so many stuff after that, lah. So it just continued. But the Lord's grace was definitely sufficient all the way, all the time until this very day.
Wow.